Good morning, everyone. This is Rebekah Veitia, and she's going to be joining us as a guest speaker. And this morning, we're talking about homeschooling. Homeschooling because it is something that is on the mind of everyone. And we're filming this in Miami, Florida. But Rebekah is not in Miami. But she lives with her husband, George, in Miami Beach, so she is very well aware of the Florida statutes when it comes to education. She is also our participant and a leader within Classical Conversations, which is a Christian-based global organization that is very well prepared to help families in the homeschooling journey. So in today's discussion, the hope is to encourage parents and to really give tips and tricks on Rebekah's behalf about how she has, basically raised her two boys on the Classical Conversations curriculum, and also just to, give hope for those parents that feel a little bit overwhelmed, stressed out, and just need some homeschooling tips, whether you are in the public education system or whether you just had a baby and you're choosing to discover homeschooling for your family in the future. We're going to cover all of that. So the first half is going to be more for those parents that just had a baby and are going to be exploring homeschooling for the first time. And the second half of this conversation is going to be geared towards middle school and high school age children and how to help them focus, how to create boundaries in the home, to create a workspace that is efficient and flows well and kind of keeps everybody sane. So thank you, Rebekah, so much for joining us this morning.
Sure.
So why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
So I am Rebekah Veitia. I'm a mom of two boys. Both my boys are still pretty young. So we've been homeschooling since the beginning, but we're still in the middle of the journey. I have always loved the idea of homeschooling because I think it brings so much flexibility and freedom to our family, to our schedule, and just really gives me the ability to be a part of this education, this time in my children's lives. And so I love what homeschooling has to offer. We've been doing it for several years now, so I'm very aware of the struggles that come with homeschooling as well. It's not picture perfect. It's not usually ready for Instagram, but it can be a beautiful process and can just really connect you as a family and give you freedom to explore a lot of things and do a lot of different things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do if you're locked into a specific school schedule. So homeschooling is more than just sitting around a computer or a table at home and working for 8 straight hours. If you're in a school classroom setting, you're in the classroom for a certain number of hours, you have a specific schedule that you have to follow. And homeschooling is not like that. It can be some days, particularly if you have older kids, but it really frees up your schedule for you and for your kids to really experience a love of learning and have the opportunity to participate in their learning and for you to set the schedule. And for your kids just to be kids, especially when they're little and they're in school all day long and then they come home and they have homework. Everyone's tired. Homeschooling doesn't make your day that long. You can do your schoolwork in a shorter period of time generally, and then be able to relax and enjoy each other for the rest of that time, hopefully.
So let's jump into some questions for Rebekah. And again, we're going to start off with, this is more for the parents who have just had a baby or have children that are very young, kind of in the preschool time, and they're really just exploring if homeschool is even an option for them, maybe tackling some of the insecurities that some parents may feel as to, the credentials if they're up to the task, you know, things like that. So just kind of tackling those doubts and fears, which I think are very natural, would you say? Yes.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So what are some of the misconceptions that people have about homeschooling?
Well, there are probably lots, but I'll try to address a couple. One of the things that I love about homeschooling is that although you are schooling from home, you don't have to be home all the time. It's not necessarily an isolated thing, and it shouldn't be an isolated thing. You don't have to be stuck at home. We love to go to museums, we love to study in the park, we love to go to the zoo, and we love to do it with other homeschooling families as well. So homeschooling just means that you're centered, you're coming out from the home. That home is your family's base, but you can do so many other things when you homeschool. You can travel to different places if your work schedule allows it as well. You know, one of my favorite things is that we can go to museums and zoos and places like that when it's not as busy. We don't have to be there on the days when everyone else is there. But you get this freedom to explore the world around you, to take the classroom outside of the home or outside of the classroom, and you don't have to be stuck at home. That's not what the point is, and that kind of leads me into the second misconception. You know, a lot of people are asking, well, how do your kids interact with others? Do they get socialized? You know, and yeah. We do all kinds of different things. They interact with kids their own age, they interact with kids that are younger and older and with adults, and they're able to carry on conversations and interact with people of all different ages and stages in life. I think they get a better, a more broad education on how to communicate, how to interact with people, because they're not in the same classroom with the same 20 to 30 kids all day long. And you know, for us, homeschooling means that we can get our schoolwork done and work together during the day, and then when we have extracurriculars later, we're not already exhausted from a long school day. You know, we've been at home taking our time, doing our thing, and then we go out. And so, you know, my boys have done karate, they've done soccer lessons, they want to do tennis soon. So all these other activities where they're engaging with other kids their own age and of other ages. And so again, it's not an isolated thing. We also participate in a community group, the Classical Conversations that Michelle mentioned, where once a week we get together with other families, other kids. And that's a great time for both the kids, but also for the parents, for us to share ideas and tips, and you know, oh, this week was rough, or we had a breakthrough this week, and we celebrate together and we struggle through it together, and you're still in a community. You know, you're still supporting each other, you're still uplifting each other, but it's a community of people that are maybe not necessarily more like-minded, but you have a common goal. You know, raising your children a certain way and educating them well, as opposed to sending your child to a classroom where you don't know what the other kids are saying or how they're influencing your child until they come home with these maybe bad habits. And I don't necessarily want my kids to be socialized in that way, you know, so homeschooling opens up a different way of socializing your kids, which can be maybe even more beneficial.
Yeah, it sounds to me like you can kind of protect your children a little bit more. Some people might have the misconception that, you know, the lack of socialization amongst themselves, you know, would prevent them from like developing maybe more independent skills. But I have found treating children in pediatric massage, when children come in and they've been homeschooled, I have found as a therapist speaking to them that their socializing skills in terms of communicating with adults is very, very different from the children that I see coming from other educational backgrounds. And I want to be clear to everyone that we are not saying that one is better than the other. We are simply wanting to educate the public on the option of homeschooling, and that it's not as impossible as some people would be led to believe. And we want to just give people a sense of hope and encouragement if it is something, and just to assure that there is a community out there. Homeschooling, I've seen it develop quite a bit, but I can say as a healthcare professional, when I am consulting with children, their ability to socialize, their ability to communicate with me as an adult is just exceptional. So my next question would be, do you have to have a specific personality as a parent to be successful at homeschooling?
That's a great question. And no, I would say you definitely don't. Yeah, a lot of people wonder, well, do I need a background in education, or do I need to be a type A, really organized to make this work? And no, you don't. What I would say is you need to be willing to take the time to assess what type of personality you are, and assess the personality type of the family. Because if you just jump in without thinking about it at all, it could be challenging, particularly if you're not a very organized person, or if you struggle with staying focused yourself. But if you can take a step back and think, okay, these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses, and then homeschooling, you just adapt it to that. So it doesn't, if you're not an organized person, it does not mean that you can't be a homeschooling parent.
So you were saying, so something really important for the parent to do is to assess their own personality. Yeah. Okay, and to assess the child. Is that correct?
Assess your own personality, assess the personality of your children. And some of that is stuff, especially if you have younger kids and you're new to homeschooling, some of that you won't know yet. So you take it year by year, or season by season. You make a plan, you see how it works, and then you change it when it doesn't work, because it won't. But you have to be willing to take that time to think about who you are and to bring that into the homeschooling. And it's totally possible to make homeschooling work for any type of family. I really believe that. But you have to be willing to make that plan, to think about what works for you. Homeschooling, you can do it in the evening if you all get your burst of energy towards the evening. That's a great time to do your homeschooling and to get focused. But if you don't work well in the evening and you get stressed, don't try to put it off until the end of the day. Do it earlier in the day. If you're not a very organized person, maybe you do need to sit down at the beginning of the year and just kind of formulate a plan for how your day is going to look, and then do your best to stick to that plan. But again, homeschooling gives you that flexibility where if you mess up one day, you just start again the next day.
I really love the fact that you touched on the individual's energy levels, because productivity, obviously, as a family unit, you all have to, if you're in this together, you all kind of have to assess. I think that's a really brilliant tool and idea. So it's really smart. Okay, so my next question is, homeschooling seems loose, and like when we say the words, flexible and things like that, it seems a little bit loose. So maybe a fear for a parent, maybe that it's not as structured as other educational systems. Maybe a parent would say something like, I'm not a professional educator. How do I know I'm not robbing my child of a quality education?
Right. Well, there are a couple of things I'm going to say about this. The first one is that particularly when your children are young, don't worry about it. Enjoy being with your children. Enjoy being outside. Enjoy just reading together. Find good books. Go to the library. Spend a lot of time reading together. And don't be overwhelmed by meeting specific requirements that you think you have to meet. Because the part of the children's education is learning to live life and learning to enjoy learning. And if you can make that process fun for all of you, you'll enjoy it a lot more. But the other thing, as you look at what you want from your homeschooling and you look at how you're going to educate your child, there are so many different types of curriculums out there. And some of them are very loose and flowy and flexible. And they just say, this week, study trees. And you pick out some books from the library about trees, and you maybe color a picture of a tree. And you talk about it for a little bit. And then there are other studies that say, now say this to your child. Now say this. Now pick up the paper and do this. So like for me, some of those are really helpful because I look at the study and like, what do I say about trees? What books do I get? I don't know. And other moms look at that and they're like, oh yeah, I could do this and this and this. But that's not me. So yes. Particularly like we've done some math curriculums where, it walks you through what to say to explain the topic. And that can be really helpful, particularly if you don't feel like you're very strong in that subject.
Right.
And then you walk your child through it, and the curriculum just lays it out for you, just exactly what you're supposed to do. And that makes it possible for parents who maybe don't feel quite as confident to feel like they're still doing a good job of that.
Yeah.
But again, particularly in the younger years, don't be too hard on yourself, even as they get older. But the early years are for exploring and learning through interacting and just reading, read. There's so many homeschool families who have blogs with book lists, and there's one called the Read Aloud Revival. I'll just make a little plug for that. She has so many different book lists. She's all about reading aloud to your children at every age. And she has a lot of great resources there about reading aloud to your children and books to pick and how to do that, how to find good books. So
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that even if you're not a strong reader yourself, just picking out books together is just, it's really, really great.
And kids, especially young kids, are very forgiving about that kind of thing. And the other option is, if you don't feel like you're a strong reader, audiobooks. There are some things I want to read with my kids, and there are some things I just don't want to read. And my boys will take their lunch and go sit in front of the CD player and just listen to an audiobook sometimes because they just want to hear more stories. And so audiobooks are a great way when you're busy and you have something else going on. You can introduce your kids to a new story and they can engage with that. Maybe they're building with Legos while they listen or doing something else, but they're away from a screen, which is not necessarily a bad thing to have screen time, but you might want to give them some other options. So it gives them a chance to be creative, but also be learning and listening.
Okay, so what are some of the downsides? What are some of the downsides to a parent, for example, that has a baby, like we mentioned before, and is exploring homeschooling? Are there any downsides, or is there anything that parents should be aware of?
Homeschooling is hard.
Okay.
It's totally worth it, I would say, but it's not easy. Again, my kids are relatively young. We regularly have meltdowns where they don't want to do this subject or that activity, and we have to work through that. Every once in a while, we get that Instagram moment or that aha moment where you're like, yes, this is why we homeschool.
I love how you call it an Instagram moment.
Well, you get the perfect picture. They're sitting there doing the project.
Yes.
And you're like, oh, this is it.
This is it. This is what I've been working so hard for. Oh my gosh, I just dated myself by going like this.
I'm doing the same thing over here. More often than not, it's going to be a struggle. One or all of you will be tired. If there's an assignment that they don't understand or that you don't understand, or it is a struggle. But the opportunity to struggle through those things with your child, I just think is a beautiful thing. To be able to see them when something finally clicks, to be a part of that with them, to walk through the journey with them, to be honest with them and say, you know what, I don't have any idea how you do this. Let's look it up together. And then what you're teaching them is that they don't have to be perfect, but there's a way to learn new things. You say, I don't know this, let's look it up. And then you're teaching them how to do research at any age, which is a great thing for a child to begin to learn. And that gives them the freedom, it empowers them as they get older to say, I don't know anything about that. oh, I don't have to be worried that I don't know about that. I just have to look it up. I pick out a book
Yeah.
from the library, or I Google it, or whatever. There are resources there that can encourage both of you in that. Other challenges to homeschooling, it can be tiring. When you send your kids away, whether or not you're working during the day, you have time away from them. And some of us like that time more than others. Some feel like they have to work outside the home. You don't have a choice. You have to. But if you're able to be with your kids, it can be a great blessing, but it can be exhausting. And you're there when they wake up in the morning, you're there when they do school, you're there at lunch, you're there in the afternoon, you're there in the evening, you're there at night, and so are they. and that can be tiring. But so you need to be ready to set boundaries for yourself. One of the things that we do is we try to do our homeschooling in the morning, and then we have lunch and we read together. And then if it works out well, my boys have like some reading time or some quiet playtime, and I can eat. Maybe if I read to them during lunch, I can eat lunch by myself and watch a little TV, or I can do some exercise or something during that 30 minutes or hour block in the afternoon. And that just helps me relax after the morning of homeschooling, and then be ready for the afternoon of activities and making dinner and doing other stuff. So creating those moments for yourself, and boundaries, and if you have a spouse that you're partnering with in this, being able to give each other those opportunities to step out for a little bit. Maybe when your spouse, if there's working from home, or if they come home after work, and they can take the kids for a little bit while you go for a jog, or just, sit down with a cup of tea, whatever it is that relaxes you, and take a few minutes. Be willing to give that to each other, and give yourself that break.
Yeah.
Fix it into your schedule before you even get started.
Right. That's a really good idea, especially when you're talking with your spouse and you have the luxury of time and the luxury of planning. So maybe, if somebody's, for example, pregnant, and they say to themselves, you know what, I want to stay home. This is a conscious decision that a couple makes. I want to stay home with my children. I don't, this is a desire that I have. This is a really great time to kind of sit down and maybe, those challenges are going to come. So kind of like doing preventive measures to, you're going to have those tired days for sure, but having a plan to, kind of take the edge off, or not have it build up to the point where, maybe there's like marital, arguments or fights, or there's like a lack of patience. So that's really great.
And that's a great tip just for parenting in general. If you have kids already, or you're pregnant, you're going to have kids, think about those things now, because parenting is tiring, just period, whether or not your kids are going off to school or at home.
That's true.
And you need to establish what you expect from each other before, if you can, but now is a great time to start if you haven't established that already. What do you need from your spouse in order to be the best spouse and parent that you can be? And how can you partner together in that, to give each other the time and the space that you both need during the day or during the week?
Yeah, absolutely. So the last question I want to cover in, for those parents that are looking into homeschooling for their future, for their young children, talk to me about some of those special aha moments, or what you call like milestone moments that are very unique to the homeschooling experience.
So there are things that your child learns, in school. And if they're going away to school, particularly like reading or things in math or science, whatever their favorite subject is, that you don't necessarily get to see or be a part of when your child is at school. Some kids learn to read at home, and parents do that when they're young, or part of that takes place at home. So sometimes you get some of that, but there's a lot that the teacher does at school that you don't get to see, that you don't get to engage in. So for me, teaching my children how to read and seeing when they finally like make the connection between two vowels next to each other, and they read the word without any trouble there. That's really exciting to be a part of for the first time. And especially if they get maybe just a little bit older and they're starting to do maybe some different projects or things, they might be demonstrating skills at school, leadership skills or critical thinking skills that you don't get to see if you're not there with them. So when you're doing those projects with them, a history project or a science project, and you are able to engage with them, but step back enough to let them kind of take ownership of it, you get to see a side of their personality that you wouldn't otherwise see. The things that they get excited about, the things that they latch on to, and the things that they're able to accomplish in their schooling that you wouldn't otherwise experience because those opportunities aren't there just in the home. One of our favorite things outside of reading is exploring outside in nature. And
it's so fun.
There's a lot of homeschooling methods are based on, just exploring, just being outside and letting your child learn about nature and develop that wonder. And I don't necessarily really like bugs and things like that, but I try to be as excited about it as possible so my boys don't take on my irritation. But to see them, oh, mommy, look at this really cool bug, and call me over. And kids love that kind of thing. This past year, we got a book about different types of birds, and almost immediately we started following a pair of mockingbirds. They came to the fence, they were hovering nearby, and then the boys started looking for their nest, and they found it. And we found these mockingbirds, and they just kind of took on this, the excitement of this nature exploration, and then they wanted to learn about mockingbirds. So we studied mockingbirds a little bit, listened to their calls, and that was one of those moments where I'd been trying to push this, like, let's love nature. And it just took off with them. They did all those things I was hoping they would do,
And I think that's really, I think that's really smart as well. I can only think the best way maybe to explain it to parents that come from an educational background where they were sent away and their parents weren't involved in their education, the joy that you feel as a parent when your baby takes its first steps. And I think as a society, everybody, no matter what language, nation, race, everyone, all parents, for the most part, it's a common ground. Like, they're overjoyed when they get to see their child say their first word or take their first steps. And to be present, if that is something that you choose and want to do, and can do, as a household, to be a part of that, like, not just those first words and first steps, but all those moments of special connection that you get to be present for. And, that your child can kind of look to you in those moments and remember you and store that precious memory inside of their mind and say, oh, mom was there, or, or dad was there. It hurts parents to not be present. That's what I've seen. Yeah. So, okay, that's so beautiful. So now we're going to transition into our second half of our discussion, which is more towards COVID and what's happening with the COVID situation and education. And maybe we're going to, address parents that have middle school aged or high school aged children and have been forced into a state of homeschooling or their version of homeschooling and have had to pivot very, very fast, very, very quickly. And what this has done is had its pros and its cons, right? But now that we are approaching the school year, at least we're filming this in Miami-Dade County, and the world is watching the state of Florida right now. We're on the map. Everyone is aware of Florida, and how we are going to adapt and what decisions we're going to make for our children's education. So as of now, there are some parents that are considering doing a 50-50, returning their children to the public education, physical space.
Right.
Other parents are saying no. They want 100% of the time doing virtual school. So we want to be able to support and give, some ideas on how parents can keep their sanity and, just help them. So so let's address, and, my first question is, can you speak about what parents are using in Florida in the public school system? Like, what can you speak on that?
Well, there are a couple of things that I'd say. One is that Florida has a great program called Florida Virtual School, and that provides, I think, a really easy transition to what your child's already been doing in the public school to just doing it at home. It's online assignments and classes. I believe they send you all the books and materials for free. You just sign up and go, basically, and they'll be doing exactly what their peers are doing in school. So it makes a really smooth transition. The other thing that I would just encourage, families that feel like they don't necessarily want to send their kids back to school, but they were really overwhelmed at the end of last year with everything being thrown on them, and they didn't really like the way homeschooling went for them.
Yeah.
Is that was not really what homeschooling needs to or should look like in a lot of ways. So don't feel like that's the way homeschooling needs to be if that's what you're choosing. That was an adaptation of the public school system. It wasn't Florida Virtual School. It wasn't really homeschooling. It wasn't going to school. So again, take a step back now and see, I think I would like to homeschool, but I didn't like how that went. And make a plan for what would work for your family, because it doesn't have to be like it was for March, April, May of last year.
Yeah,
that's not necessarily the best way to homeschool.
Yes, I agree.
But Florida does have that virtual school, which might be the right transition from the public school to a homeschooling model. It gives you a chance to do some research about maybe what type of homeschooling method you'd like to use in the future, while you're still sure that your child is keeping up with what their peers are doing in the public school. So
Right, absolutely. So something that I've heard, some feedback from parents that I've heard is, my child is actually doing really well. Some children feel very relieved because they don't feel the burden of, getting up quite so early and, taking transportation. Like it's a lot more relaxed for the children. So some children, not all, but some of them are happy about that, come from a, pretty healthy, stable home where they can relax in. That's not always the case for all children, but for those that are excelling, because now there's a little bit more relaxation, but the parents really feel overwhelmed and they're just, eager for the child to go back to school, but the child maybe is saying, I kind of like this and I'm doing better and I'm still keeping up my grades. So let's, how can a parent create a workspace in the home for themselves and the child that is effective and flows well?
Right. So like you said, I think the key is creating that workspace. We live in a 2-bedroom apartment, so we don't have a homeschool room or an office space or anything like that. But we create it's almost more of a routine than a specific space. Like we have a place where we do our schoolwork, like the dining room table. But it's that process of creating some specific maybe actions or even words or music that sets aside that you train yourself to recognize as, this is the school music. Maybe you put on some classical music or something calm that you all enjoy. This is our school music now. And so it transitions you and your kids into that mode of, now it's school time. We like to, sometimes we'll have tea and read a story first. And that's kind of our, we have our breakfast and we have our tea time and our reading time. And then it's like, okay, now we've done that. Now it's school time. So that's our transition from being at home and playing and running around to school.
Mm.
And so creating those, whatever it is that works for your family, that helps you just train your minds to say, okay, now we're home, now we're at school, now we're at work. Even if it's all at the same, on the same sofa or at the same table, creating those moments that help you to physically and mentally transition from one thing to the next. And I would say, especially with the older kids, the middle school, the high school kids, bring them into that with you. You know, ask them, okay, what's the best space for you to be the most productive? Will you be most productive here at the dining room table? Would you be most productive laying on the floor of your bedroom with a snack and your music on? And then, you know, if they say, well, I want to be in my bedroom, you know, but they're not getting anything done, then you reassess. But
Sure.
if they can be productive, you know, laying on the floor, some kids like that. Some kids work better with music in the background. Some kids work better with silence. And you do too. So that's, you know, having multiple kids and parents in the home, there are lots of things to assess. But trying to figure out the best way to balance all of that and to create an environment for you and for each of your children that that encourages that productivity and focus. And definitely bringing your kids into it to say, how would you want this day to go? You know, these are the things that you have to accomplish. What motivates you to get that stuff done? How can we work together to have a good school year? What milestones do you want to hit? How do you want to celebrate when you hit those milestones?
Oh, they'll be happy to do that. They'll be very into that.
And homeschooling, you don't want your child it shouldn't be like a process of bribery or always getting something as a reward. But my son really likes his playtime. So he wants to play with his cars all day, every day. But what I said this year, I was like, he came to me and he said, so I want more playtime during the day. He plays all day long. Okay. So let's see, how can we incorporate that into our day? So I said, he's younger, so I don't want him spending really more than 20 minutes on any given subject. So I said, I'll set the timer for 30 minutes for each subject. And if you get it done in 10 minutes, you're going to have 20 minutes of playtime. And that's his motivation. He wants to play with his car, so he's going to finish his work. If it takes you 20 minutes, but you're working the whole time, that will stop after the 20 minutes and you'll get your 10 minutes of play. You can run around with your cars and that's great. If it takes you all 30 minutes and you're really not working, you're not going to get the playtime on that. But that's his motivation. And so that's how we've created, that's how we're going to do our structure this year. We're going to try it, see how it works. But he came to me. I'm incorporating him in that process with me so that we can create the structure that we need, so that he knows what his day looks like now, and that helps him to focus and to plug in better when we get there.
Right. So what I'm hearing is, the housing situation is very different. Some people are, have the ability to have multiple rooms, but what you're saying is that for households that have to accommodate and maybe don't have the physical space, you can still create a workspace, a play space, a relaxation space, all within the parameters of limited physical space. And it just requires training your mind and really maybe using sound, images, colors, things like that, and just being able to be flexible. So for example, just have it designated from Monday through Friday from 9 to 12. This is our, and just using all of that, but not necessarily thinking, oh, we need to move into a bigger home because now we need a room to relax in, or now we need this. It's just really using the space that you have efficiently, but creating parameters. And I love the use of sound and the use of music, because children are very, very audible, and they love their music, and they're also very visual as well. So I think, empowering them, I would have loved that as a teenager. If my parents would have come to me and said, okay, let's plan your reward. So reward could be, socializing, safely, of course, COVID wise, but like, you know, you could do like a Zoom hangout with your friends, or you could do something where, you know, people feel safe, but it's something that they're like you said, like motivates them,
Right.
and kind of seeing what space.
And again, you don't have to spend money for that motivation. You know, you don't have to, it doesn't have to be a big thing, but it just has to be something, yeah, that motivates them.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
And I would just say, you know, the key is open communication. Again, be very clear about the boundaries and the routine that you're setting, and make sure the whole family understands that too, especially if you and your spouse are both working from home, and you're trying to homeschool. You know, make sure everyone knows, okay, this is the school time, or I'll be working with the kids during school during this time, and you'll be doing this with them later on, so that you don't get those interruptions or distractions from the spouse or the kids. You know, that everyone knows what that plan is going into it. It will just be a lot easier to maintain, and to enforce. That sounds kind of harsh, in that, but you know, to keep up that routine and that structure.
I love the fact that you emphasize the timer, and I think obviously for older kids that time can be increased. Is that right?
Yes. So with younger kids, you know, with the youngest ones, really, again, I wouldn't even encourage you to do a whole lot of sitting down kinds of things. You're just kind of getting them used to sitting down and getting a structure. But 10 to 15 minutes, you know, my oldest one is going to second grade now, so 20 minutes is a good amount of time for him to spend focusing on any one thing. And the thing is, if he's working but he doesn't finish his lesson in that 20 minutes, then that's fine. We're done. You know, he can finish it the next day. And the thing about homeschooling is that it allows that flexibility. You know, he worked diligently for 20 minutes. That's it. That's all that I wanted of him. If he's not working, that's where the trouble comes in. But if he's working and he doesn't finish something, that's okay. We can finish another time. With the older kids, yeah, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, maybe an hour if they're in older high school and they're working on something, that time definitely increases. But what I would say is to still, especially if you're new to this, still allow your child that flexibility. You know, if they're working on a subject that's difficult for them, give them a break halfway through. Or if they're getting really frustrated with something, just stop.
Yeah.
Move on to another subject, take a break, go for a walk together, or let your child go for a walk, you know, in your backyard, whatever it is that you have that you can utilize, and then come back to it again later if you can. You know, if you can't, save it for the next day. If you can, come back to it again later. But be willing to give yourself that flexibility, because that's what homeschooling is all about. You know, some things will go more quickly, and you can do a couple of lessons. You know, my second grader, he loves math. So sometimes we do more than one lesson because he's relatively quick at it. So if it takes him 5 minutes to do one lesson, we're going to do another lesson. But if it's just 10 minutes of math every day, you know, that's great. You know, that's totally fine. But especially with the older kids, another thing that I'd recommend is every day, or week or whatever it is, you know, either you do it for them or you do it with them, or have them write out a list of the tasks that they need to accomplish that day. And then they can be checking it off as they do it. And that, you know, I love to make lists, but I love to be able to check stuff off the list. I feel very productive when I do that.
Okay.
And, you know, help your child see, these are the 4 things that we need to get done today. And once you get those done, you know, you're free to move on. And a child that's old enough to read and write and do all that stuff on their own, that can be really helpful, because then they can clearly see, okay, this is my day. This is what I have to get done. This is the time I have. And it helps them to begin to take ownership and responsibility for that work themselves. And to say, okay, well, I have these 4 things. This is what I want to do this afternoon. So I have to get these things done first. How can I make this happen? What order do I want to do them in? And that gives them freedom and choice and flexibility within the structure that they need to have as well. So.
Yeah. How do you, if you're physically present, like how do you check up on your child without seeming abrasive or seeming you're encroaching or you're like micromanaging them? Like, any tips on that?
Yeah, you know, that's a great thing to think about. And I guess I would just encourage, you know, again, planning ahead. So saying, all right, every hour or whatever, you know, with younger kids, maybe more often. You probably need to be closer with younger kids. It just kind of depends. But You know, bring me what you've worked on, or I'll come in and see if you have any questions or anything that you need. And that gives the parent the time, you know, to focus on their work as well if they're working from home, you know, getting out their assignment or doing what they need to do. But then there's a clear time when they'll come in and just check on the work that their child has done. And the child is still like maybe turning in their work to you as well. Or, you know, you can say like, I have to finish, you know, I as an adult have to finish this for my work. So if you have any questions, just set that to the side and I'll come in about an hour and then we can sit down and work through whatever it is that you're struggling with. And then, you know, if the child's old enough to say, okay, well, I'm not quite interested in this, let me start on this subject, you know, and then we'll come back to that. Not all children are quite there yet. I don't get this, and then they just stop.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to create those separate spaces, have a plan for what to do if your child either has a question or gets stuck, or just what works best for you checking in on them. You know, do you want to come in every hour? Do you want your child to come out as soon as they're done with an assignment and like hand it into you?
Yes.
And to make that plan so so you both again know what's expected of you, and your child doesn't feel like you're constantly looking over their shoulder, and you don't feel like you're a taskmaster or something. You have the plan, you know what it is, and then with all parenting, stick to it as much as you can. Consistency is key with kids. You know, if you can be consistent with something, and it's habit training. It forms habits for us. It forms habits for them, and we want to be forming these good habits.
Yeah.
It's time to practice.
Can you talk a little bit about how to handle interruptions?
Yeah. So again, and you know, this might be a little bit harder for those of us that aren't quite as organized, but planning ahead is your best friend with homeschooling as much as you can. You can plan ahead the whole year, and things are going to change, so you have to get flexible. But particularly day to day, you know, have some snacks that your child can reach that are already available. You know, I'll try to keep some veggies cut up that are in the door of the fridge. So if the boys get hungry for something, you can say, well, you know where the bag is, you know, go get that. That's a snack that you can have. Have a plan for when your child finishes up with their schoolwork, or if they're already done. A list of chores that they can do or need to get done, maybe before they're allowed to do something else that they want to do. Have it posted somewhere where they can see it regularly, or maybe like a little jar with the folded up pieces of paper with a chore in it, and they pull one out, or they have to pull out 2 or 3 before they can have their screen time or their call with their friend or whatever it is. Right. So have those things already ready for them so that when they're done, they have something to do. And then the same for a list of activities, you know, pull out some board games or something that are already available to them. If they've finished their schoolwork and you allow screen time, you know, let them make sure they know how much time they have, what they can do. If they have a friend they want to talk to or something like that, plan ahead so that they know once I finish these tasks, then I have these options. And then they're less likely to come to you and bug you about stuff. And if they do, just send them to the chore jar. In the middle of work, go pick out a chore. But give them those, talk through with them, you know, what would you like to do? Here's some activities that I'm suggesting. Or you can have free play time with your Legos or whatever it is. Again, my kids are a little bit younger, so those are the kinds of things they like. But whatever it is that motivates your child, and have that plan ready so that when they're done with their school or whatever, they're not automatically coming to you or bothering you every few minutes about something. But also have a plan, you know, if they really do need something, or they have a question that you haven't addressed yet, you know, have a plan so that they know how they can approach you. You know, an older child can write a little note down and just kind of slip it to you, and then maybe sit across the table from you while you finish up what you're doing, take a look at the note, maybe if you're in a conference call or whatever it is. My boys, we're trying to teach them to just rest their hand on my arm. So even if I'm in the middle of a conference call, they come over, they're quiet, they just put their hand on my arm. And then as soon as I can, then I can address the issue with them.
Right.
If you can go in a different room, if you're on a call or in a meeting, something like that, and you can have like a little do not disturb sign, but let your child know how long it's going to last. This meeting is going to be about an hour with the do not disturb. Then I'll turn the sign over, come in if you need something. And then your child knows, okay, well, I can't go in right now, but in a little while, mom or dad will be done, and then I'll be able to ask my question. And just
Right.
let them know what those boundaries are, and you'd be surprised how quickly they pick up on those things. But again, be consistent. If they come in when it's a do not disturb, don't drop everything for what they need.
Right.
Unless they're bleeding, obviously, then drop everything. But say not right now, and wait until I'm done. And then they'll see that pattern forming, and they'll pick up on it and join you with it, I think. So.
But I also think that, addressing the extreme availability where a parent feels like they need to be available at all times with no boundaries, and then also approaching the extreme unavailability where the child feels neglected and maybe hurt and rejected because, well, gosh, you're always working, when do I have access to you? Or let's say, God forbid, the child has a fever, is vomiting, and is showing, severe signs of physical illness, and they feel like, you aren't approachable. So I really love the fact that you, again, are using a lot of visual, visual signals and maybe nonverbal signals, or something where you and the child can communicate beforehand and say, let's stick to this, and then holding the parent accountable and saying, you have to, because ultimately, you're training the parent as well. You're learning as well. The whole family is learning as well. And then the spouse, your partner, can also jump on board, because if they're working from home, these are also tactics and habits that they need to be included in as well.
Right. And so the trick is that, particularly with this working from home, some people were working from home before this, but now a lot of people are working from home. And so it's hard to separate that work time from the time off. And so to create that line and make sure you're saying, okay, that was work, now I'm available to you. And as adults, we need to be consistent with that too, for our own mental health, but also for the health of our children and the relationship there. Make it a priority to think about how you're prioritizing your time. To create those boundaries for yourself in terms of, this was work, but now it's 3 o'clock or 5 o'clock or whatever, and I need to be done for my own sake and for the sake of my family. And do your best to stick to that if you can.
I guess the last couple of questions, a big concern with parents that maybe this has shaken their concept of what education is. And they think to themselves, I don't have the luxury of time. My child is not a baby. My child is in middle school or high school. Are they too old to transition to, let's say, a curriculum like Classical Conversations? And what is Classical Conversations, and what should people expect?
Sure. I would say that it's never too late to transition to homeschooling, even for the older kids. Obviously, there are different issues that you're addressing. When you start with a preschooler, that's just what they know. When you start with a 10th grader, that's not what they've been used to. But again, if you're open and you communicate together, you can create a plan that works for both of you. That can be a really, really beautiful thing. When you're thinking about transitioning and homeschooling older kids especially, it can be really intimidating because a lot of the subject material that they tackle is stuff that maybe we don't necessarily understand as well. Often it's the math and the sciences, physics, geometry, things like that. But sometimes it's just as hard to think about reading Shakespeare or learning world history or whatever subject we were not as strong in. Or maybe you didn't finish high school, or maybe you didn't go to college, and so you think, I can't teach this to my kids. There are all kinds of programs and curriculums that help to empower the parents and also the students in this education. We love Classical Conversations. That's the homeschool community that we're a part of, and curriculum that we do. And one of the things that is their goal is really to give parents the tools they need to homeschool. If you start in preschool and if you start in high school. Classical Conversations was developed specifically as a high school program originally. because the founder discovered that a lot of parents were not homeschooling after junior high or high school. It just got too hard. They didn't know what to do. And she really wanted to equip parents to be able to homeschool through those years. So it provides a lot of training and encouragement and opportunities for the parents, as well as a structured curriculum for the kids.
I think you've done such a great job of answering all these questions. I'm going to add some links below and your email address on how people can get in touch with you if they're interested in pursuing this. Rebekah, thank you so much for your time in helping parents. Again, just know that there are options out there, and whether they're starting out, with their brand new family, or whether they're just kind of needing some guidance and just some helpful tips for the upcoming school year. Thank you so much.
If people have questions about classical conversations in particular, I can talk more about that, but just homeschooling in general too. So email me and send me your phone number, and I'll give you a call, and we can get connected. So.
Thank you, Rebekah. Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye, Michelle. Thanks.
Bye.